Hi, today we're just going to talk about some angle vocabulary. So the first one is supplementary angles. Supplementary angles are two or more angles that add up to 180 degrees. So a common example we'll see is a straight line that is intersected by another line. So it creates two angles like this. Because they're right next to each other on a straight line, that means this angle and this angle together add up to 180 degrees. So for example, this could be 120 degrees. Well, they have to add up to 180, which means that this one would be 60 degrees. It's not always like this. It doesn't always look like it's on a straight line, although that's very common. Maybe sometimes instead they'll just say, hey, are these two angles supplementary? And you'll have to figure it out. So maybe they say this is 45 degrees and they say this is 135. And they say, hey, are these supplementary? You have to figure that out by adding them together. And oh, yes, these add to 180. So yes, they're supplementary. There's a couple of ways that you can remember the vocabulary word supplementary. The first is that the S in supplementary, you can turn it into an 8 for 180 degrees. So that helps you remember that supplementary is 180 degrees. Another way you can remember it is that supplementary starts with an S and a straight line starts with an S. So it has to be two angles that create a straight line, which is 180 degrees. The second vocabulary word is complementary angles. These are two or more angles that add up to 90 degrees. So often we'll see something like this that looks like a 90-degree angle with another angle or line in the middle, which is splitting this up into two angles. So for example, if this is 20 degrees, and we know that these two are complementary, they have to add up to 90, then that would mean that this is a 70-degree angle. Now, same as before, they won't always be right next to each other on a 90-degree angle. Sometimes maybe they'll just say, well, hey, does a 45-degree angle and another 45-degree angle add up to complementary? Are these two angles complementary? And you say, oh, well, they add up to 90 degrees, so yes, they are complementary. Some strategies to help you remember complementary is that the C in complementary can turn into a 9 for 90 degrees. So that can help you remember 90 degrees. Also, C is complementary and C complementary and C corner. A corner is 90 degrees. So that's another way that you can remember them. Okay, vertical angles. When you have two lines that cross each other, vertical angles are the two angles that are across from each other. So like these two are across from each other. They're not next to each other. These two are across from each other. They're not next to each other. So they are vertical angles. A fact about vertical angles is that they are the same degree. So if this is 70 degrees, then this one also has to be 70 degrees. And if this is 110 degrees, then this one also has to be 110 degrees. And our last one is adjacent angles. Adjacent angles are just two angles that are right next to each other. So like these two are adjacent because they're right next to each other. These two are not adjacent because they're not right next to each other. These two are adjacent because they're right next to each other. But these two, well, there's no angles drawn. This and this are adjacent because they're right next to each other. But the 110 and the 110 are not adjacent because they're not right next to each other. So adjacent angles, it doesn't matter what they add up to. It's just that they're two angles that are right next to each other. Okay, whatever they look like. So that is some angle vocabulary.